You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Richard Copeland, sitting in for Sharon Stone. On today's edition of Engage, we present a roundtable discussion we held last night here at the Central Florida Public Media studios. The state's Stand Your Ground law was passed more than a decade ago, and perceptions about its application question the equity with which the law is applied. We gathered 5 people from across Central Florida to share their feelings about not only Stand Your Ground and concerns of inequity, but responsible and safe gun ownership, and what they wish people knew. I moderated this discussion with Rebecca Fernandez, Central Florida Public Media's Community Engagement Coordinator. Here is our roundtable discussion, recorded on Wednesday night. 20 years ago, the Florida legislature passed a Stand Your Ground law that changed the way self-defense shootings would be interpreted. Rather than acknowledge an obligation to retreat from imminent danger, Floridians would be allowed to stand their ground, providing legal protection for shooting somebody posing a threat. Here in Florida, we saw the impacts of this law in 2013 when Sanford resident George Zimmerman shot and killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, an unarmed teen who was walking through the gated community where his father's fiancée lived. Under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, police were prohibited from arresting Zimmerman. Even after charges were filed 6 weeks after the shooting, a jury acquitted Zimmerman of murder and manslaughter charges. More recently, the story of Ajike Owens, a mother of 4 living in Ocala, had gripped the nation. Her neighbor, a 50-year-old white woman, had been harassing Ajike and her children for more than a year, calling the police on her children for playing in this neighborhood. The dispute culminated in June of 2023 when the neighbor, Suzanne Lawrence, blindly shot Ajike on her porch through a closed door, killing her. She tried to use a Stand Your Ground defense unsuccessfully and was sentenced to 25 years. These are 2 of many cases in Florida employing a Stand Your Ground defense. It is difficult to quantify how often this law is used because the state stopped reporting the statistic last year. Florida is just one of 35 states with a Stand Your Ground law. Analysis of FBI data indicates homicides in which white shooters kill black victims are deemed justifiable 4 times as often as when the situation is reversed. And communities that have been marginalized both legally and culturally bear the brunt of this law's inequitable application. The purpose of tonight's discussion isn't to glean information. This isn't a Q&A session. It's an opportunity to listen to different perspectives from our shared Central Florida communities and experiences. I'm here to stimulate this discussion, not ask questions. We encourage you to engage each other and ask each other questions, and to think of this more as a kitchen table conversation. Ruben Saldana is a community advocate with Credible Messengers, a mentorship program. It's a nationwide program. You lead the Central Florida Credible Messengers program. Chris Lusant is owner of Firearms Training and Consulting Security Solutions. We know Monique Worrell, state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit in Florida, serving as the chief prosecutor for Orange and Osceola counties. Audra Fontanez is an educator at the Elite Preparatory Academy and a faith and healing leader. And Alton Edmond, a trial attorney and founder of Edmond Law LLC, and you are a Second Amendment advocate. Thank you all for joining us. So I'm going to ask, I said I wasn't going to ask questions, but I'm going to throw this out here to get the conversation started. When did you first hear the phrase, Stand Your Ground? What did it mean to you? And what does it mean now? We'll start with you, Alton.
Probably was back when Trayvon Martin was executed. I remember being in law school at FAMU College of Law, right in downtown Orlando. I remember classmates going to march in the streets and protest. And I remember watching the news and following what was happening and knowing that something seemed off, very much off about this situation. And while I am an advocate of the Second Amendment, while I exercise my right to carry for self-defense purposes, something felt wrong about the way that Stand Your Ground was sought to be applied in this particular situation when you had an adult man following a child and police on the phone telling him to stop and to let police handle the situation, him refusing to do so and somehow still escaping prosecution. In that case, I was tore up about it, and I still am sometimes, because I think about Trayvon Martin and his situation, and I juxtapose myself into his shoes. I remember when I was in high school, in the 10th grade, my wrestling coach, who was a white man in his mid-20s, about 24, 25 years old, he used to give me a ride home from wrestling practice, and I lived in a poor, mostly African-American community. He dropped me off, and as soon as he dropped me off and I got out of his truck, there were two sheriff deputies who began to question me when I got out of his truck. They said, "You fit the description of someone that was involved in, I don't even remember the crime at this time." And they asked if they could search my backpack. And I gave them permission to do so. They searched it, and then they said, "You can be on your way." But I just imagine other people in these instances where they interact with people who see them as something different than what they are, see them as a threat as opposed to a child, see them as a perpetrator as opposed to a customer who just got some Skittles and I believe some soda from a store. And I imagine that something like that very well could have happened to me.
Is that an experience that any of you can relate to? Chris?
Yes. I'm from New York, right? In New York, and this is not right, but in New York, road rage is a common thing. And usually in New York, if there's a problem, we step outside the car and we just go at it and then go about our day. I remember this was before Trayvon Martin. I got into it with an older gentleman, and I was 19 at the time, so I didn't really know much about the laws or anything. I just knew what I was accustomed to doing or seeing. We got into it, he brake checked me, I brake checked him. I got out my car. I remember when I walked up to his car, I'm thinking he's getting ready to get out. It was an older man, pointed a revolver out his window, and it was pointed right at my chest. And at that moment, he could have justifiably, shot me. And so when the situation with Trayvon Martin occurred, and I started to learn more about the laws and things of that nature with what I was doing in life, I realized that that could have been his justification. My intent wasn't to cause him any harm. It was just, hey, two people going at it, and the situation could have escalated. And so yeah, I think about these things that whether myself or other people might have experienced and how the outcome could have changed. I had just turned 19, skinny little kid with a wife beater on and some shorts, listening to my music, and this older guy and I got into it. He brake checked me, I brake checked him back. He was giving me the finger, I'm giving him the finger, and he's saying pull over. I stopped, got out the car, and when I walked up to his car, he had a revolver pointed at my chest.
What was your takeaway from that experience?
That Florida is not like New York. People in Florida have guns. New York, we don't I've never had anyone pull out a gun on me in New York. It was back then. It was we would if you needed to handle something, you would fight. What we say, you square up, and then that's it. I dap you up, and we keep it pushing. Or if I don't dap you up, the situation is done and over with.
You can't sort of count on that level of New York civility as a universal realm.
Absolutely not. I was like, wow, okay. So these people have guns out here.
Monique Worrell, this is very similar to a case that we've seen here in the community that relied on a stand your ground defense, albeit it was a little bit roundabout coming from Tallahassee in the way that it did. But what we've heard Alton and Chris describe are common occurrences.
They are. I actually have chills listening to them because let's be real clear. Self-defense isn't the problem. I think that self-defense was intended for individuals and expanded through Stand Your Ground for individuals who are in a public place to rightfully be able to defend themselves when they are being attacked without having to prove that they couldn't get out of the situation for defending themselves. That premise by itself is fine. It's one that I think as citizens, most people can agree with and embrace. The problem is that's not how it's being applied. The problem is you have situations like the one Chris described happening where situations that used to be and should be handled with words or maybe even fists are now being resolved with guns. And instead of telling Chris, get back in your car and leave me alone, and calling him an expletive or maybe, shooting him a bird, he pulled out a gun and Chris's life could have ended that day. And what we see happening legally is that, generally speaking, like in the Trayvon Martin situation, the other person isn't there to tell their side of the story. So the only side of the story that we have is the side of the individual who used deadly force. And because the burden on the state of Florida is so great that we have to first prove by a preponderance of the evidence in a Stand Your Ground hearing that self-defense wasn't justifiable. But then if we make it beyond that threshold, go to trial and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that self-defense wasn't justifiable without having the other person there, it is sometimes difficult, if not impossible, to do. Now, the case that you're referring to, again, it was a road rage incident. And unfortunately, since I've been back in office since January, I have seen an increase in these road rage incidents that are being addressed with the use of a firearm. And this is a danger to all of us because when you have a driver shooting at another driver, all of us who are driving our vehicles on the roadway are potentially in danger. So this isn't a Second Amendment issue. This isn't a self-defense issue. This is a community safety issue. And in that particular case, we had an individual who was driving on Colonial Drive, East Colonial Drive, on a very busy morning. And she thought that the person behind her was tailgating her and she was personally offended. He may or may not have tailgated her even closer after she said, "Get off my ass, buddy." Okay. And then she got out of her car and physically put herself in the way of his vehicle, stopping him from leaving the scene of their argument. And he decided that he was going to keep trying to drive around her, which he finally successfully did drive around her. There are differing accounts on whether or not he hit her when trying to drive away or not, but the video is clear that she was putting her body in front of his vehicle trying to stop him from leaving. He drove around her. She pulled out her phone in a way that looked like she was taking videos of his vehicle, which I think would have been appropriate if she thought something happened that was problematic. But what wasn't appropriate was what happened next. She got in her vehicle. She chased him down Colonial Drive. When she caught up to him, she was behind him, and then she got in the right lane next to him. She swerved her car towards him and didn't hit him, and then she swerved it again and made impact with his vehicle, smashing into the rear corner panel of his vehicle. In the law, we call that an aggravated battery with a motor vehicle. The reason that that's important is because one of the exceptions to self-defense is if you are in the commission of a forcible felony, which is aggravated battery with a motor vehicle, you may not avail yourself of the self-defense as a defense. Another exception is if you are the aggressor of a situation. You may not avail yourself of self-defense as a defense. So these were two very big problems in this case. And while in most of these cases we don't have the individual who was shot to speak, in this case we had video evidence that showed where it began and where it ended. And looking at it through the lens of different individuals, because this was a discussion in my office of, is it stand your ground? Is it not stand your ground? Is it justified? Is it not justified? There were attorneys who disagreed with me. There were attorneys who agreed with me. And what I decided to do, because reasonable minds can differ on this, what ultimately happened after she rammed her vehicle into his, she provoked a response and she got one. He came out, he looked at the damage to his vehicle, he went to her car, he opened her door, and he punched her a few times. Most people only saw that video, and they were outraged at the fact that a man would punch a woman. I wasn't defending the fact that this man hit this woman, but I grew up in a house with boys. I'm the only girl in my family. I grew up with boy cousins, and while it was never allowed for my brothers or my cousins to hit me, I was also taught that if you hit them first, expect a reaction. And in this case, what happened is she hit him first and he reacted. Whether or not we agree with his reaction isn't the issue. The issue is that under the law, you may not initiate violence and then claim self-defense, and you may not be in the commission of a forcible felony and claim self-defense. Within 6 seconds, that long, of him opening her door, she shot him in the face. From my perspective, she initiated this violence because she knew she had a gun. And part of the problem with these road rage incidents is only you know if you have a gun. So if we get into it, I don't know that you have a gun. So I'm going to respond thinking that we're just going to have words. And I'm going to approach you to have words, and you're going to pull out a gun. That's not a fair fight. That's not a just fight. And that's not what self-defense was intended to impose. So what I did in this case, because there were reasonable disagreements about how we should proceed, I took it to a grand jury, the community. That's what we have grand juries for. Now, I didn't have to take this case to a grand jury because in the state of Florida, the only case that must go to a grand jury is a first-degree murder. I didn't see this as a first-degree murder. I saw it as a second-degree murder, one that arose out of a heat of passionate incident. But I took it to a grand jury because there were reasonably differing opinions on how this case should be resolved. And I presented all of those arguments to the grand jury. I presented to them that this is a potential self-defense case. And I presented to them the reasons why I didn't think self-defense was justified. And a grand jury returned an indictment for second-degree murder. That means that the case should have gone to a judge. But this case didn't go to a judge because self-defense has now become a tool of political gamesmanship. So we can use self-defense to bolster the Second Amendment right that we all know and is well founded in the Constitution that we all have a Second Amendment right. So that's not a discussion, and that's not the argument here. The argument is, how can we promote community safety when we exempt individuals from the safeguards that have been put in place by the legislature, saying that if you incite violence, you may not avail yourself of self-defense. If you are in the commission of a crime, you may not avail yourself of self-defense. When we have politicians coming in and exempting individuals from the law and furthering the disparities that you mentioned in your opening with regards to who gets prosecuted and who gets out of it. So what happened is the Attorney General, for those who haven't watched the news in the last month, came in and said, this is self-defense, and we're going to defend stand your ground in this state, and threatened that if I did not drop the case, that I would be removed. Well, you know, when you're removed once, being removed again is not really that big of a threat. But what it would have been remiss of me to not address was the fact that when he made that public statement, he signaled to the judiciary what outcome he expected in this stand your ground hearing. And he went a step further because he also said that even if you're successful, my office will not defend this case on appeal. Now, that was a big deal because the state attorney's office doesn't do its own appeal. The attorney general's office does the appeals. So if we went to the hearing and the court went against the attorney general and sided with the facts in this case, and the defendant appealed, the attorney general would not defend the appeal and the case would have been turned over on appeal. So as the state attorney, and I know you've been wanting to jump in for a minute, so I'm going to wrap it, I had to make a decision. Do I gamble letting this lady walk with zero accountability for the murder of this man? Or do I allow her to enter a plea that provides some accountability for what took place? And they asked for a plea, and taking all of those factors into consideration, I agreed to allow her to do 18 months in the Department of Corrections, followed by 10 years of probation, with her becoming a convicted felon, knowing that with her as a convicted felon, the likelihood of any citizen in this community having to stare down the barrel of a gun held by her again would be very unlikely.
Ruben, I want to toss that to you because the question came up, how does the community address this? And I feel like this, more than a lot of other policies, speaks directly to specific communities. It sends a message. What kind of message does this send?
Ooh. I'm gonna side with the unpopular story probably at this table. And I pretty much decided that even before I got here, because the population that I deal with, which everybody in here deals with, hearing what everybody does now, right? You gotta protect, you gotta defend them, you gotta prosecute them when they're wrong, you gotta pray for them, and you gotta defend them if they're legally able to get it done, right? But I'm dealing with primarily, so many names for it, right? Underserved kids, high crime areas, get to the point, black and brown kids, right? Black and Latino kids. And here's the unpopular opinion. These laws, they don't apply to our kids. They don't give a damn. When I was strapped as a 16-year-old and her office, but she wasn't in office, prosecuted me for my crimes. When these shootings are going on, we just had the one in Oak Ridge weeks ago, one street away from my house where I do my gloves up, guns down, the 15, 16-year-old, Oak Ridge High School, bumps into one. You ain't gonna apologize? Nah, meet me at the basketball court, goes over there instead of fighting, he shoots him to death, right? You think he was thinking about stand your own ground law? You think he was thinking about, so from my perspective as a credible messenger mentor, teaching gloves up, guns down, which is just one of our initiatives. It just happens to be one we got legendary for because our students started competing legally in Africa and Colombia and all these other places and coming back with these belts, right, after changing their life.
About boxing.
Yeah, no, boxing, mixed martial arts, and kickboxing.
Gotcha.
And, but from a credible messenger perspective, we want to, what we call grow up, grow out, get rid of the stinking thinking, right? Our kids, they're not focused, they don't care. We can talk about these laws all day long. You think these kids give a damn about it? When they are strapped and ready to hurt, they don't care if stand your own ground, how many states do it, 30-something, whether Monique Worrell prosecuted that case last week or not, Trayvon Martin, they don't care. The enemy is not the state prosecutor. The enemy is not the white cop, right? The enemy is hatred of self, because who they're killing looks just like them. We're here on the east side, right? Where her and I grew up gangbanging 30, 40 years ago, right? We popped off at people that look like her and me, like Latinos and Latinas. And my area right now is primarily Haitian. They're popping off on fellow Haitians, right? Because when it's a Haitian against a black or a Haitian against a Latino, now it's a race war. And those are kind of rare here in Orlando, right? And so there's a self-hatred. And so to get to the point with the stinking thinking, what I teach the kids, and this is how it's communicated, what my duty is and my mentors is, if there's 30 pounds of guns right there and 30 pounds of dope right there, I don't give a damn if the CIA, the white man, the Colombian, the green man, the alien, I don't give a damn who put it there. You should have enough damn sense to know not to pick it up, period. That's the accountability that my neighborhoods, the black and brown neighborhoods, don't have enough of, in my opinion, in my expertise in 19 years in prison, starting as a child, and my expertise still in these red zone areas here in Orange County and all over the world. There's not enough accountability to say, I'm not picking that up. And if I do pick it up and shoot somebody, I'm not going to say it was there because the CIA is so goddamn wealthy. I don't care if they brought it. It's not for me to pick up, and it's not for me to harm somebody that looks like me. It's probably just as poor as I am. So I can't really relate when it comes to the law. They're not talking about that. And that has not been their motive since I've been gangbanging since the 80s. That was never, what's the law? How much time am I going to get if I shoot such? We didn't give a damn. We dealt with it as it came. So I think, like I said, I'm not going to give the popular opinion about the law because to this day and back then, we didn't care about the law. We either broke it or we followed it.
Audrey, I see you nodding your head in agreement.
Yeah, I definitely agree with him. We definitely weren't thinking about the law. And me particularly, I don't enjoy politics. I'm not a fan of politics. I appreciate that we're protected by certain things and stuff like that, but I have a God that I serve that protects me just fine. And that's just really my stand on things is really just from a direction of love. But I agree with him that there was many times when we were growing up that, when you're broken inside, you don't really feel too loving. You don't really feel like, and you're really quick to, once you're triggered by something, you're really quick to react. So what you got is just a bunch of impulsive, sort of broken people that are losing their tempers and then they're reacting.
And we're hearing more that description applied to a larger and larger segment of the population. Where do you think that's coming from?
I think it's coming from just abused parents having kids and not knowing how to raise them properly, and then they're feeling, then they're getting abused, and then they're growing up and they're becoming parents, and then they're passing down the abuse to their kids, and no one's facing the fact, no one's growing spiritually. I myself was a very foolish, improperly raised young girl. I was abused as a child. I grew up in abuse. I saw a lot of abuse. And because of those things, I became abusive. And I was very, very quick-tempered in the sense where I refused to be victimized. Everything felt like I was going to be victimized. I have had a gun pulled on me several times. And the sad truth of it is I didn't even flinch, didn't even faze me. I wasn't even afraid with a gun at my face, did not scare me. I was just like, well, you gonna pull it or what? Like really, really arrogant sort of, and it's like he said, you reach a point where you just don't care anymore. You don't care, right? And the only time that I felt like caring was really my walk with God. Growing spiritually. This is why I do what I do. Praise God, he qualifies the unqualified, right? He put me in a school to help kids. I've been mentoring for like 15 years, but he put me in a school to teach kids, and I get to tell them and show them how God changed my life and turned me into somebody different, gave me a value, gave me an appreciation for life. But yeah, in certain situations like the one Monique was talking about, I really sympathize in that situation. I think that's terrible. The guy came in and he started punching her in the face and whatnot, but the girl came out and she went and pursued, in a heat of anger, she went and pursued her. She's just as guilty as he was. You know what I mean? And I could understand she's getting punched in the face, so she reacted and shot. But at the same time, she knew that she had a weapon. She knew that she had a weapon, and then he came in and was aggressive towards her, and then now it's a whole big ugly mess. You know what I mean? I do feel like she should be held accountable. Because she knew she had a weapon, she knew she had a gun, and she didn't have no reason. Why keep consistently following? And then what you got is just a bunch of angry people. You got a whole bunch of people growing up in really crap situations, and so they're taking the law into their own hands. Really, like he said, the law really doesn't. You don't think about the law. You're not thinking about the law. Neither are they.
Alton, is that part of the problem? Is it a perception of multiple legal codes? And I don't mean, applicable in the courtroom, but we heard Ruben say that they don't think about these laws. It barely applies to them.
I agree. I mean, I think that I represented thousands of criminal defendants, And many of them have something in common. Many of them come from communities that are underserved, that have very few resources, and that feel like their choices in life are very much limited. And when you put people perpetually in those situations, a lot of times they revert back to very rudimentary survival instincts. Kill or be killed, fight or flight. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a dangerous situation to put people and entire communities in situations where they feel completely helpless, hopeless, and even defenseless, and feel like, okay, I need to take care of whatever because no one is going to help me. No one is going to save me, not the law, not law enforcement. And so I need to handle this myself. And so I grew up in a community where a lot of teenagers, when I was in high school, I grew up, my mom was very religious in the church. And so I didn't have an opportunity to participate in a lot of the things that my cousins and friends on the football team with me did. But I saw a lot of my friends participate in the gang life and go down that road. And fast forward, over 10 years, over a decade after we graduate from high school, and I've had many classmates reach out to me to try to hire me to represent them in gun charges, drug charges, all sorts of types of crimes. And many of them were people that were born and raised in the same environment that I was raised in. Fortunately, I made a different choice because I had different type of guidance. I had a different type of mentors, and I had a different type of family that wasn't going to allow that.
I want to say that is what supports the disparities that we discuss. Because the people that you guys serve may not know or consider the law. But this lady, she knew the law. She was very clear on the law. She understood exactly what happened next. After she shot this man in cold blood and law enforcement got to the scene, she told them, well, I learned in the class that I should ask for my lawyer, right? Your people not going to tell them that I need to wait for my lawyer. Your clients aren't going to tell them I need to wait for my lawyer, but please understand that she knew she needed to wait for her lawyer. So what we're dealing with is a difference in how different communities are taught to respond to these sorts of incidents.
There's sort of yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to jump in on that because that's, with what I do, I represent that type of community, and I see there's a big difference between black and brown people, our black and brown community members that come to my classes versus my white counterparts. They're very well aware of their laws. They're very well aware of what they can and can't do, and they always try to, in class I get questions, well, can I do this? And then respond a certain way. I said, no, don't do that. Just because you have a firearm doesn't mean that should be your go-to result. We call that the Superman syndrome. Just like people, when they get drunk, they get that liquid courage. Like, you have a firearm, your responsibility is to try to avoid, de-escalate. If you're put in a position where your life is legitimately threatened, not because you started the altercation, but because this person decided to commit a robbery upon you, that's a whole different ballgame. You have the right to go out and defend yourself. But we're seeing that people are getting firearms, and they're resulting, anytime a situation happens, they want to use their firearm. They're so quick to go to the firearm. They're so quick to, let's pass a de-escalation, let's not use critical thinking, because I have a firearm, I'm going to use it. It's my God-given right.
Where do you think that comes from, that attitude?
Upbringing, right? Privilege. Like how I grew up, I was always told, you were black and you don't need to own a firearm. That's how I grew up. My mom, the first time I said I wanted to get a gun, she pretty much slapped the taste out of my mouth.
Do you remember why you wanted to buy a gun? How old were you at that time?
I think I was probably 19, right? And it was shortly after the incident that I told you that I had experienced. And I was like, you know what, I think I want to, I'm in Florida now, I want to get a gun. And my mom was like, absolutely not. You are black, you don't need to own a gun. That's not for us. So that's how I was conditioned, right?
Tell me more about that.
It's a cultural thing. You know, growing up, you see that people who look like you don't get the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we see these situations go left, excessive force. I remember growing up in New York, I would see how the NYPD would. Some of my cousins, they were gang members. They did what they did. But what they would do is they would beat them up, take them to the other side of Brooklyn, drop them off where the Crips were, and the Crips would beat them up, and then they would come back. You know what I'm saying? That was their way of dealing with them because they were talking back to them or they didn't respect them. You know what I'm saying? So when you grow up seeing stuff like that and you see that the way the NYPD policed the Jewish community is not the same way they policed us in Brooklyn or even in the Bronx. We know that they know they can't do that with that type of community because, number one, that community has money. When you have capital, that means you have resources. That means you have connections. So I'm going to treat you with the utmost respect because I don't know who you may know, right? But when I'm policing in the hood, you guys don't know your laws. You guys don't have capital. You guys don't have resources. You guys don't have connections. You guys don't know your rights. You think you know your rights. And unfortunately, we see that sometimes in some of these situations. And I think what we're seeing now is more people in the community are learning that they need to learn their rights. They need to actually learn their laws. That's what we do as well. We teach people that to be a responsible gun owner means you have to be cool, you have to have good temperament, you have to make good decisions, but you also have to know your laws. You have to know the right from wrong. And when you're stepping into this high liability community, it's not to start stuff, right? It's simply just to protect yourself, and that's that.
Yeah, I'm feeling it, brother. I can actually give you a short story on that. I'm feeling him 100. But before the story, I would like to say I appreciate something that Monique Worrell is doing. I seen it on social media. I've actually caught her recently at a church, and we got separated. She got pulled one way, I got pulled another way. But I've been seeing her educate the kids in these communities that we are describing. The kids, which is important. They don't know they're right. I just told you my opinion is they don't care for the law. They don't know the law, right? They'll deal with it afterwards, and then that's a whole nother game. But like I've seen her, from what I've seen online, it's like pamphlets, and I've been asking her, right, as credible messengers that are also partnered up with her, office. Let her, and I never got to tell her, so thank God for this opportunity. Let us start getting, because we're in those communities, and we can reach the kids that won't show up to your classes, right? And let us start educating them on, hey, I can't tell you when I was in prison, I found out about the law as well, like the brother said when it happened, in Seminole, but I was in the college of DOC, right, in prison, but I can't tell you the amount of brothers that was in there that was like, damn, man, like I did the same thing, but I'm here because mine was illegal. It didn't have bodies on it. There wasn't previous murder. They didn't know, they weren't taught by their parents or their school or their environment, hey, we're going to go get a gun legally, right? Because like you said, it's not culturally acceptable. But to go back to my story, I'd love to get some of your education materials or brothers like you into these areas that the credible messenger mentors are in, and let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
Educate them, right? They don't have the education, and I'm not qualified to give it. When I got out of prison for doing 19 years, my first wife, Audra, who we're divorced now for 5 years, we're still cool though, right? But she was legally, no, this is why I was feeling you. She was legally strapped, right? And I told her, I said, listen, if we're gonna get married and live to it, you gotta get rid of it. I don't wanna be around it. I don't want the legal casing, law. I don't even wanna learn the law. And she's like, bro, like you got a lot of enemies. I said, I don't want, because I don't want you to have to use it for me. And I said, and then I have a feeling that it's not going to be the same story as everybody else. I was scared, even as a Latino, right? Who we have a little more white privilege than black folks, right? A little more, because we got some more white blood in us, right? And so just being real about the situation, I told her that she got to get rid of it if she wanted to marry me. And then knowing her temper, like back in our days, right?
Yeah,
See, the state attorney's in here. Don't do it because Miss Monique's in here. We ain't trying to open up no. So we ain't trying to open up no. But knowing her reputation. Yeah.
I don't read about this in the Sentinel.
Knowing her, right. Knowing her, well, I'm all over the Sentinel for that and the good stuff now. But knowing her story, I was like, no, you're a hot temp. We're not doing this. And so I was scared to even have somebody My wife, who could legally own,
To protect
locked up. I didn't want it. I would have. I told anybody I would have rather been shot than shoot somebody. Right now, 11 years later, after our divorce, watching the environment and watch the Cowboys, that my mind has changed. I like for people to be legally strapped around me now because I feel unprotected now. I can have all the martial arts, box skills. That ain't gonna save me, you know.
Correct.
Because it's a cowboy state now. The smiles are there, the cowboy hats are out, and I don't want to, you know, come to a gunfight with a toothbrush, right?
Absolutely.
And just brush some teeth to sound good, right?
No, we could absolutely
Yeah.
get together. Monique's doing some great work. I want to thank you for providing more insight on that case because I've gotten literally about 100 messages or text messages in regards to that specific incident. And knowing how you care about the community and knowing that, like for me, I have to always be objective when people are calling about, hey, this situation, that. Watching the video, yes, I was frustrated. I'm like, hey, you know, he opened up that car door, it's forcible felony, but not knowing the totality of the circumstances. Hence why people like myself, we have to be objective. Like even when we're teaching civilians, we tell them, hey, you have to be objective because what you see in that video may not be the full backstory. And once you're provided with that additional context, it can change what we're looking at, right? And I didn't know that, and I didn't speak out on it because I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't look at any reports or anything like that. So you providing that information provides clarity to the legal and responsible gun owners who are looking at that situation, who only saw that 10-second clip and said, well, Chris, hey, he opened up my car door. That's a forcible felony, right? I perceive that as a threat.
Yeah.
However, not knowing, she initiated. And that's one thing a lot of gun owners typically tend to do who are not properly trained or who try to manipulate the system. They think that they can be the aggressor, and then once their behinds start getting handed to them, now let me go to the gun, you know? So you can't do that. You can't force people to respond a certain way, and then now you want to cry wolf because now you're actually getting bit. So that's why it's best to have good judgment and you know, try to avoid those situations at all costs.
So
9 times out of 10, if she didn't have a firearm, she would have driven away and
Exactly.
got her business.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So it's very, very clear when you look at the series of events. She was out of her car, big and bad, blocking him from driving away.
Bolden.
Yeah.
Because she knew she had a gun, and if things got left, then she would be able to
use it.
respond
Correct.
that way. And as he was out of his vehicle, looking at the damage to his vehicle, before he ever started to walk towards her, she was doing this.
Digging in.
She was doing this. The cameras all around show her moving towards the middle. So she was getting the gun ready.
She was prepared.
She was prepared because otherwise she would have driven away, or she would have locked her door,
Correct.
or she would have done something to protect herself. But I believe, and I can't say with certainty because I don't know her mind or her heart, but the evidence showed me that she wanted to shoot him, right? She wanted to shoot him because otherwise...
She wanted it to reach that point where, all right, let me go use my gun.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah. So thank you for that. And I'll pass that information because I got so many calls about that. And I'm like,
Well, the
look,
news only reported one part of it.
Correct.
Right? And that's why, you know, unfortunately, we can't depend on the news for the whole story because they have a 30-second clip and they're going to put in that 30 seconds what they think
What is
is most
sensational.
important and what's sensational and what's going to give them the clicks and the likes and all of those things. But to me, this was a very clear-cut case that self-defense was not appropriate. And unfortunately, the politicians in Tallahassee only watched that part of the video as well. And they weighed in on something that they didn't have all of the information on. And this is how politicians interfering with the law, and now the law is only applied to certain people and not to others. And that's where we have the injustice and the inequity in our system.
And that breeds even more injustice.
Yeah,
because there are people that put these people in political positions that are watching what they're saying and what they're doing. And those people are on my juries. Those people are deciding guilt or innocence. And these are the people with mentalities that are influenced by their political leaders and the people that they look up to. And so it's a cycle, and it feeds into itself, and it's
Anger
dangerous.
breeding anger. This
We'll continue this discussion on the application of Florida's Stand Your Ground law in our communities and gun ownership. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media.
The Wrap is a podcast from Central Florida Public Media, curating the top Central Florida news stories and in-depth reporting each week. Join me, Brendan Byrne, as I bring you news headlines, deep reporting dives, and insightful conversations from the news team. A new episode of The Wrap every Friday morning. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Richard Copeland, sitting in for Sharon Stone. We continue our roundtable discussion, taped last night at the Central Florida Public Media Studios, addressing inequalities in the application of Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Participants included Ruben Saldana, a community advocate with Credible Messengers, a nationwide initiative matching community leaders in mentorship relationships with area young people. Chris Lusant is the owner of Firearms Training and Consultant Security Solutions. Monique Worrell is the state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit of Florida, serving as the chief prosecutor for Orange and Osceola counties. Audra Fontanez is a teacher at the Elite Preparatory Academy and a faith and healing leader in the community. And Alton Edmond is a trial attorney and founder of Edmond Law, LLC, and a Second Amendment advocate. The discussion was moderated by Central Florida Public Media Community Engagement Director Rebecca Fernandez and myself.
It is so clear that each and every one of you is so deeply entangled with all of the issues that this law seeks to address in some way. I wonder, what do you think this law gets right, and what does this law miss? I
will say that for Black and brown communities, when we see situations occur, and we see that, if it's a white person that's trying to use Stand Your Ground versus a Black person, what it does is emotionally, it triggers friction. For some people, it might trigger hatred, a further distrust within the criminal justice system, because they say that if it's, we've seen in times where it's a white shooter who's trying to use Stand Your Ground, but was the aggressor, they get the benefit of the doubt. But if it's a Black person that's trying to use Stand Your Ground, the system may not see it as such, right? And then they have to go through the hoops of trying to defend themselves, going through trial, and that's a financial strain, that's an emotional strain, and we don't see that law being equally applied, right? And I think we need to start the community. If you want people to have faith in the system, start applying the law equally.
I agree with State Attorney Worrell in that the spirit of the law that expands people's constitutional protections is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Right? Your right to be able to protect yourself and not have a duty to retreat. Because in certain situations, it may be inconvenient or impractical for you to retreat from someone that's coming after you. For example, if you're in your car and someone's ramming you and there's people in front of you and behind you, where do you retreat to?
Can't.
If you're in traffic and it's gridlocked and someone's ramming your car, you can't retreat. And so I think that these protections, the expansion of these protections, the spirit of it is a beautiful thing. I think, again, as you said, the problem is the application can be problematic when it's inequitable. And also, there's something about the state of Florida that it also exacerbates this issue that maybe some don't realize. But in a lot of states, there are far fewer courts than we have in the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, we have 20 different circuits. In New York, the court system isn't set up that way. And so we have 20 different circuits. And in Brevard County, our circuits, we probably have 10 different judges that are circuit judges that handle criminal cases. In Orange County, it's far more than that, And so in a particular circuit, you could have 10 different judges that all interpret Stand Your Ground law differently. And if the appellate court over in Daytona doesn't correct it or issue some ruling, all of those circuit judges can continue to apply stand your ground law differently.
As they see.
Now multiply that by 20 and think about every circuit that we have in the state of Florida and all of those circuit judges basically having carte blanche ability to decide for themselves what is protected, what is not protected, and appellate courts and Florida Supreme Court sometimes taking 5, 6, 7, 8 years before you ever get a clear answer on how this issue should be resolved.
And to add to that, there isn't a lot of case law in this area, right? So as I looked at this case in deciding how we should move forward, there isn't any specific case law that says this is what it means to be in the commission of the felony, and this is not what it means to be in the commission of a felony.
It would seem to me that a policy this serious would be clearly articulated.
One would think, although I think that some of the ambiguity is intentional. Add to that, though, the individual prosecutors making the decisions about what is self-defense and what is not self-defense. So you talked about the judicial circuits and you talked about the judges within the judicial circuits, but within each prosecutor's office, you have prosecutors making decisions every day about, is this self-defense or is this not self-defense? In this particular case, the prosecutor who had this case decided that it was self-defense. And when I looked at it, I said, well, wait a second, this doesn't look like self-defense. So at that point, I said, well, listen, I have to do my part to solve this problem. From now on, any case that you're going to decide that it's self-defense in this office needs to come through me. Because I want consistency in how we are treating people in this community and not just having it be arbitrarily decided by the particular assistant state attorney whose desk this case came across. Because we are all going to be looking at it from different perspectives. We're going to bring our own cultural experiences to it. We're going to bring our own upbringing to it. And that's natural. I'm not saying that there's anything negative about that. But the community deserves consistency. And the only way that I can ensure that we are treating these cases consistently is if I'm looking at every single case. And that's how I ended up being the one to take this case on, because I want to make sure that we're doing it all the same. So at least what's coming out of the state attorney's office in the 9th Judicial Circuit is all the same. Now, what happens when they get to the court, I can't control that.
Correct.
I can only control what I control. I think there's like a whole poem about that.
And so Alton, I want to ask you, as somebody who works with people that are in these situations, we've got an experienced prosecutor, an experienced defense attorney, both saying that the number of judges, the number of prosecutors, the space allowed for interpretation just leads to confusion in the legal community. How does this get parsed out in the communities with Central Floridians, gun owners, property owners, people who could find themselves in a legitimate stand your ground scenario? How are they to interpret this?
People often rely on what they see on social media, what they see on television, what's popular, word of mouth, he said, she said, but people are not relying upon reliable sources, in part because the reliable sources aren't even that reliable. As we indicated, or as I'll speak for me and not for anyone else. As I indicated, there are so many different ways that laws are being interpreted because of the different courts, prosecutors, so on and so forth. I'll give you an example. Recently, I was working on a case because in the state of Florida, you know that medical marijuana has been legalized at the behest of the populace. But for decades, it has been the law that when a car is stopped and an officer smells marijuana, that is probable cause to search the vehicle. But now that the smell of marijuana does not within itself indicate that an illegal action has occurred or that a law has been broken because medical marijuana is legal, there's a legal issue there. And the circuits have a lot of different ways that they interpret it. And so I was dealing with this case in Brevard County, and in Brevard County, the law wasn't on my side because of the specific facts and what the Fifth Circuit of Appeals in Daytona decided. But I looked at the law and I was researching, but in Pinellas County, the officer's search would have been unconstitutional and my client would have been protected had they been pulled over in St. Pete. The same way, same facts, same circumstances, but in St. Pete, their actions are perfectly legal and the officer's search of their vehicle was illegal and they should have been let go. And it's hard to talk to my client and tell them, well, listen, I'm sorry that this is happening, but in this situation, the best plea deal that we could get might be the best idea for you, because we can't try this case and win it, and we don't have grounds for a motion to suppress. But that's what we have, and we're stuck with it. And you can't expect lay people to be well informed if legal experts are having issues understanding and having consistent rulings on certain issues within the state.
Audra?
I just think we have like a bad moral problem, just in general. Just in general, morally, people think it's, they're just going based on emotions. They're handling things based on their emotions. This includes people in politics. This includes people that are working for the court system, the justice system, officers. They're all operating from a place of whatever emotions they're dealing with and whatever they got going on, and everybody else is just going to have to deal with the consequences based on that. If you take one situation, and one side is going to say, yes, this works for me, and the other one's going to say it doesn't, but either way, you're wrong somewhere, right? It's not going to sit well with one side at some point in some way. So, for example, if you shoot somebody on your stand your ground, that person's family is still going to hate you no matter what. They're still going to feel like it's unfair. They're still going to feel like it's not okay.
It doesn't really matter what the letter of the law is.
Right. This is why when the program started years ago, I was ready. I was ready to do this root camp program and everything because I knew how desperately the community needed it. You guys don't really need, you need people to start from when kids are small. Mm-hmm. This is why being in a school is so important to me, because you got to catch them when they're nice and small. You know why? Because they're already being affected by their parents who are already affected.
So what are we teaching? Are we teaching them responsible gun ownership and use? Are we talking about
I think at a certain
resolution?
age, I think at a certain age you should, and I do think that you should be teaching kids about hope and faith. And about just being kind and goodness, teaching them the 9 fruits of the Spirit, bringing them close to their spirituality. Because all these kids is walking around with these big holes in their heart. Can't tell you how many kids is just looking for a mom or a dad, somebody to step in, right? So now they're just building up this anger and this hatred and this sadness in their heart to the point where they don't care, right? Now they're reactive, right? And then if they're older, they've now did something wrong, and now let's say they have kids. Now their kids are suffering because grandparents are raising kids, right? So you just got a bunch of just hurt people. And if we can start when they're young, you know what I mean? And not only that, but I feel like political parties, I feel like police officers, judges, and I feel like they need healing. I feel like they need mentors. I feel like they need somebody to turn to and say, okay, something happened in your life at some point. So, because if you have a 100% opinion about something, 100%, and you can't see the other side at all, I feel like that's very closed-minded.
Everybody's looking to jump in right now. Alton, I'll start with you.
To answer your question, yes, I think that you should teach responsible gun ownership to kids at a young age. Why? Because in the state of Florida, a young child can hold and use a hunting rifle. I've gone to the gun range and I've seen 8, 9-year-olds at the gun range with their parents shooting. And so if the law allows for them to hold and use a gun, they should know how to hold and use one responsibly.
And Chris,
so that's what I do
Exactly.
as well. I will say this. I think it is important to teach our youth firearm safety, basic firearm safety. What we do with our youth class that we teach, we also teach them conflict resolution. It's a good thing to use a firearm under the supervision of an adult. But what the firearm is not used for is for conflicts. So yes, we talk about safety and things of that nature, but we also ask them questions because we know that some kids think a certain way, right? However, we notice when we ask them a specific question about, all right, this is your homeboy, right? You care about your homeboy. Yeah, that's my dog. I care about. Okay, cool. Now, he's in possession of a firearm, and you believe that he's not going to do anything to hurt anyone, but he doesn't know what he's doing. So now he's playing with this firearm, and then this firearm goes off and it hits someone that you care about, right? That's your homeboy, and then let's say that's your cousin or your sister. How are you going to feel in that situation, right? Because a lot of times these kids, they know who's in possession of firearms at their schools. So they're like, I ain't no snitch. However, it's about how you articulate these things to these kids. It's not you being a snitch. If you care about your dog, you know that he's not aware of what he's doing. He's a child in possession of a firearm. It is your responsibility because you care about him and everyone else to notify an adult. It's very important. So with our class, we teach them basic firearm safety because it is important, but we also teach them how to think, like how to deal with conflicts, how to deal with their emotions, and so on and so forth, to address those issues. Because Florida, firearms are the leading cause of death for our youth in this country, and it leads in Florida as well, right? Why? We have a lot of guns here. These kids need to know what to do. Don't think that they don't need to know, because guess what? When they're not with you, they're at their friend's house, they're playing with guns. Mm-hmm. And then we hear about these negligent situations that go on, and then a child gets hurt, right? So it's very important. We did fire drills in schools. We got to teach these kids about youth safety.
We just saw a case this week. Very unfortunate case. Two young children found their twins.
I think they were 4 years old.
Four, 6, somewhere. Found their mother's gun wedged between the cushions of the couch that she forgot she had left there. So, there's multi-generational opportunities for education there. Clearly, Ruben, are today's youth receptive to this messaging, and also acknowledging that
What message?
the youth in Winter Park are going to interpret a message very differently.
No, but what message? What message are you saying?
About responsible gun ownership, about conflict resolution, about what role a gun plays in a person's life.
Conflict resolution, I'll say yes, but everything else, I'll have to definitely say no.
Why? What does gun ownership or gun possession mean for those youths?
We can go start with the music, the TV, or politics. Who's the biggest, baddest, one with the biggest nuts? The one with the biggest guns. The one in the movie that's a victim getting robbed, getting his chain taken, is not the hero of the day. The one, give it a homeboy, right? That's the hero. The strongest country in the world has to stand by helicopters and military tanks and 100,000 people like this with rifles, right? It's not the peaceful one sitting there praying for everybody. That's not who our kids are looking up to, right? And then in the music industry, right? It's not the ones sitting there hugging each other, even though the tunes and the beats might be good, right? No, it's the ones toting the guns, right? So visually, the toughest, baddest son of a gun in environments of oppression, in environments of poverty, in environments when there's victims, right? You have to be or act like and wear that mask of the biggest, baddest son of a gun. And what's the image other than what I have not seen no other image except the ones with the biggest tank, the biggest gun, the biggest fighter, right? The Muhammad Ali's, the Mayweathers with the millions of dollars, and right, we've had Muhammad Ali's son come out here and give a good message about this same stuff, right? He was a victim. He can't fight like his father. He's been here to Orlando with us several times.
And Monique, Ruben's mentioned something that both Audrey and Chris have mentioned, and that's the role of media. Has the media warped what the perception of self-defense and stand your ground should be? And, you could take it from a vigilante film streaming on Netflix down to a police procedural that you might see on the networks.
I have so many things to say.
I'd love to hear that.
All right. So first, to answer your question, I don't think the media, I think the media has distorted it. I don't think that's intentional because I don't think the media themselves understand.
What don't they get about it?
It's confusing. If the lawyers and the courts haven't figured it out, then certainly the media can't figure it out. When I gave my press conference after the plea regarding this case that we talked about here today, I was so frustrated because when I saw the reporting, it was clear that no matter what I said, they still didn't get it. They still didn't understand that this wasn't about win or lose. This was about the fact that there were guardrails put in place to stop people from instigating violence and then claiming self-defense. And that's what this case was about. And not one outlet reported it that way. So I don't think it's because they are intentionally trying to mislead the public. I think that this area is so broad and so vague that people don't really understand what it means. And I think that what we see happen is people use misinformation and they think they can start stuff and then finish it with a gun if it gets out of control for them. And there are some instances where that's true, but not most of the time. And I think that it just leads to the confusion. But I want to swing back to what Audra said, because I think the premise of all of this is our morality as a society. We have escalated to such a violent place where we can't even just disagree agreeably. If you disagree with me, like if you go on my social media right now and read the comments surrounding the things that I've done in this last year, you would think that I have personally done something to the individuals who have come out against me, spewing hatred and vitriol towards me for decisions that have nothing to do with them or their lives. And some of the decisions which are distorted by politics or media. But everything is so hot. We can't sit down and have discussions. We can't come to the table and talk about the things that we disagree with. And yes, simple disagreements end up in very violent confrontations. And we've got to check our morality. About a lot of years ago, I was in my home and someone broke into my home and I heard my blinds shaking and I thought it was my cat. So I woke up out of my sleep, I got up, and I didn't see my cat at the window. My cat was in the bed. So that means it wasn't my cat. That means someone was trying to break into my house. I grabbed my gun and I walked around to the wall and I stood there. I could have shot, but I didn't want to, because from my perspective, taking the life of another human being is a last and final resort. It's not where we start. But today with, what's that video game? Fortnite and Call of Duty
Grand
and
Theft Auto.
all of these things,
Everything's
our
a game.
children are learning that we shoot first
Ask questions.
and we ask questions later.
And being desensitized to violence.
And they are
Completely
desensitized.
desensitized.
They're completely and totally desensitized to violence. And the culture of our politics and our society embraces and encourages that cultural insensitivity. And the last thing that I want to say is that our children are having more and more guns and more violence because of the culture of our society. And as state attorney, I am having to deal with 11, 12, 13, and 14, and 15-year-olds who are not committing accidental violence with guns, but intentional violence with guns, because the soul of our country has led to violence.
I have to ask a question. I feel like I keep hearing the conversation kind of come back to, in different areas, the concept of equity and inequity. Who has guns, who knows their rights, who has the information and who doesn't, who gets prosecuted and who doesn't. I keep hearing it in different places. And I wonder, how do we move toward a Florida where everyone feels both safe and seen?
We have to change so much.
We won't see that in our lifetime.
It starts with the kids. It
I
starts with
think-
the
We won't see
little
that in our
kids.
lifetime. I
think
don't
it's a
think
multi-layered
since Adam and Eve,
approach.
for those that believe there, it didn't happen then. Cain killed Abel.
Is the onus on the community,
I
or is
believe
the
that.
onus on the variant the way that it's interpreted in different
I
jurisdictions.
think in a perfect
I don't
world,
think
it'll
we'll
work.
ever see it.
In a perfect
Yeah,
world.
I don't think we'll ever see.
I don't think we'll ever see that change.
It's hard
because
in the household.
this nation was founded on racism and violence.
Absolutely.
The very core of this nation was built upon that. And you would have to tear it apart and rebuild it in order for it to be something different. There is too much to change. How did law enforcement begin? Slave catching.
A lot of people don't want to.
That's how law enforcement began.
That's the truth.
And so when we talk about the inequities and the issues here, it's a lot deeper than video games and media have a lot to do, have influence on our youth, have a lot to do with a lot of things. But we got to go down to the core, to the foundation, if we're going to talk about actually changing things that have been systemically embedded into the fabric of this nation for centuries.
Framework.
Ruben Saldana?
Yeah, I have an interesting example. And I'm saying this with a smile and smirk on my face, but I always try to envision this, right? So let's envision right here on the east side, where we're at, east side Orlando, about 300 Puerto Ricans, right? Some of them look like me, tattoos all over them, a couple bandanas here and there, right? AK-47 strapped, legal now, we're legit, right? Walking in and out of stores, posted up on every corner, right? Then let's do the same thing for Paramore, Pine Hills, Mercy Drive. You want to talk about a change of law that'll happen overnight? So if those that don't like this law, maybe follow it and watch it get changed. Here's the example. The Black Panthers, right? So it's really the Black Panther Party of what? Self-defense, right? So what do? See, we see those pictures now, we're like, damn, those are some militant, illegal criminals. What people don't know, those pictures when you see them with them big guns bigger than my own body, those were all legal. What they did was they applied the law to themselves for the first time, and then all the laws got changed.
Ronald Reagan didn't like that very much.
All the laws got changed. What? Whites have been running around with guns like this for 200 years, and the black, hell no, we're going to take it and we're going to change the law. So just imagine that in Florida. That's exactly what the Black Panthers proved. It's okay for you, but it's not okay for us.
That's what happened. California
Right.
used to be an
Oakland,
open carry
yeah.
field. When they
Yeah.
did that, immediately.
Immediately the law changed. You
Immediately.
can't have a bunch of them black and brown folks walking around with guns the
Exercising
same
this,
way,
right.
and it is a racial thing, right? And listen, I got some racist, redneck, Nazi-loving partners too in my life. In prison, you have to get along. Everybody, because there's races, black, Latino, and whites. We have to sit together year after year after year after year. Because if not, everybody will be dead. Because it's in every prison in Florida. And so you get to know these people. And I'm telling you right now, the last thing that they would want to see is us equal to them on that type of standing. We already can whoop them. I'm not even going to go there, but I'm going to stay away from that. But, physically, Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and black, we are the dominant in the sport, like, hands down, right? So when you equal it in weapons, and I know this is, I'm coming off racist, we live in a racist world, point blank, a racist society. And it's not just here. I travel the world. It's everywhere.
So I'm going to come back to you, Chris. It sounds like, among a lot of things, part of what needs to change is the narrative. How do you do that through education? We have sort of this binary perception of what Americans should be doing with guns. Either we don't see a purpose for them, or they're utilitarian for hunting, or we have a Second Amendment right that is unquestionable. So how do you teach this? How do you teach not just the responsible ownership of guns, but the responsible mental health that goes with gun ownership?
I think people need to understand that you're a human first, right? Conduct yourself as such. And sometimes you can give the person all the education in the world. As humans, we have free will, right? So some people are going to just make the decisions that they make. But overall, I think educating people, understanding that, you're stepping into a realm of just self-defense, right? And understanding that just because you have a conflict with someone doesn't mean that it has to go to this, right? It needs to meet a specific threshold. What I tell people is, don't start the encounter, right? So you're not starting the encounter, check. Is this person actually putting your life in danger, right? when we say in danger, what is actually happening? In this situation that you're in right now, is it causing you immediate death or great bodily harm? If the answer is no, then all right, then what are we doing? Can you walk away from the situation? And a lot of people, the pride, the ego, they believe that, well, I worked real hard for my TV or my property. I'm not going to allow anyone to steal it. Bro, property can be replaced, right? And I think it's understanding the value of life, right? And I think that's part of the issue too. People don't value life. And when you have that along with ego and privilege and I have a firearm and Superman syndrome and so on and so forth.
Is it the same conversation with a white Floridian that you would have with a black Floridian? You're talking about two people that could have very different both perceptions and interpretations of the law and how it applies to them and who would be applying it to them.
Absolutely. In my classes, we have those raw, transparent discussions, right? When I have white folks that come into the class, majority of them kind of know a little bit about the laws already. Pawpaw's been teaching them how to shoot since they were 4 or 5 years old. So they have a understanding and respect of firearms. No fear, like I've been accustomed to firearms all my life. But then when we have black and brown people coming into the classes, it's fear. It's, man, I don't believe I qualify. I don't think I should exercise my Second Amendment right because of what I see going on in our society. So we have to have that conversation. And what we do is the white folks in our class, we educate them because your life is, your shoes compared to my shoes are going to be different. So what we're doing is we're exposing you to what other people have experienced, their trauma, their upbringing, and we create that dialogue. So it's more than just firearms training. It's also, hey, I'm getting to learn a little bit about your life and what you've been through. I never saw it that way. This is my first time hearing of this. Well, yeah, you grew up in Windermere. Now you're dealing with folks in Pine Hills. Like it's different, right? So being exposed to that is important.
And as both a defender and a prosecutor, do you see the difference between people that have had some level of this kind of education, this information, versus people that never just picked up a gun and walked out the door?
Absolutely.
What does that look like in the court, in your environment?
It looks like someone who gets to walk for murder as opposed to someone who doesn't.
Alton, you're nodding your head.
Same. I mean, I want to say something without saying too much. I have clients that come in that are very well aware of the law and their rights. And so they will often do things to agitate law enforcement. You'll see them arguing and cursing at law enforcement. And that's usually white clients that do that feel like it's okay to be adversarial with law enforcement because they know what their rights are. When I've seen clients, people of color, lash out at law enforcement, it was usually because they were angry or upset about what happened, but not because they knew what their rights were and knew that their rights were being violated and felt like because I have the high ground and because I will be exonerated of this, I will talk to you however the hell I want to because you shouldn't be doing this and I'm going to have your badge for this. And so it's absolutely a different mindset between different people, and privilege is huge when I assess certain cases and look at the facts of certain cases. I have only once gone to trial on a battery on a law enforcement case and won. And it was a 50-something-year-old white man that was my client in the case. And he stood up to law enforcement. He said what his rights were, and it's on dash camera, part of the interaction. And that coincidentally was also the only case in which I've been able to pick a jury with more than one black person on it too. That's the only case that I've ever had where I've been able to pick a jury because the prosecutors have found a reason to always strike my black panelists when the defendant is a person of color. And so, again, it's definitely a difference, and you see it. I've seen it a lot in practice.
Audra?
Yeah, I actually have to agree. But me working at a school, I deal with a lot of teenagers, and we're very, very close, right? So I have this weird sort of God-given talent that they just trust me with stuff. They tell me everything, right?
Teen whisperer?
Right, yeah. I don't know how, but they do. They're like this. Mr. Hodge, can I talk to you? Like every 2 seconds. But I find that I really do come across a lot of problems with some of the kids who are conditioned to believe certain situations, which I understand how they feel. But let's talk about some of my black teenage students. Conditioning has warped their opinion on certain situations that are the reality, right? So something may have happened, and immediately they think it's a racist issue. However, myself, I know this. I know the person. I know who they're dealing with, and I know that this person is not a racist, right? But yet they're like, and I mean emotionally, really just unglued, screaming racism, and it's not the case, right?
It's just the emotional.
Right. And while I do agree that racism is a real thing and it does happen, but I also believe that there are many children that are affected by this to a point where they're thinking certain situations are racist and when they're not. They're just almost using that outlet, right? So I'll give you an example. I have a best friend, right? We're very, very close. And we could not be more opposite. Could not be more opposite, okay? She's, just like country, white dad, all American, diehard Republican. I can't stand politics. Like, grew up, really wholesome, awesome dad and awesome mom with a great life and a great, home. And she's super proper, and she doesn't cuss, and she dresses real nice. She owns the school where I work. Like, she's classy, right? Top tier according to what everybody's standard is, right? I'm just an average kid from the Bronx who went through some things, who was a product of my environment and reacted on certain things, right? So nobody understood our friendship. Everybody was just kind of like, yeah, that's what, even her kids and my kids. Her kids would always argue, why do you trust her? She's this, she's a loose cannon, right? But we always came back and we built a relationship, right? So we built a friendship to where she understood me of how I am because she took the time to understand me. Whereas I understood her and the way that she thinks and why she thinks that way because I took the time to understand her. And that's the problem you're not seeing right now. That's the thing you're not seeing with people nowadays. You're not seeing people being able to meet somebody that they would otherwise never talk to because they come from different sides of the world or whatever, grew up different, look different, act different, talk different, and they don't want to even give it the time of day. You have a big problem with people that are conditioned to believe certain things that ain't really the case all the time. Now we're in the homes building anger that don't need to be there. This is why I'm gonna keep bringing everybody right back to Scripture and Jesus.
Do you see these conflict resolution issues with these kids? Do you see them struggling to figure out how to?
100%. They are struggling, and this is why I love what I do. Because I can intervene because this kid loves to talk to me. This kid loves to talk to me. They come from different walks of life, and I bring them to the Word. I bring them to the Word of God.
What do you say to them?
I tell them, that Jesus teaches us to love one another. I understand in certain scriptures there's a time to kill, there's a time to this, and there's a time to that. I get all that, and I'm for the ability to defend yourself or protect yourself. But I really do feel like you gotta teach from a loving perspective.
Do you find that if you've got that opportunity to stop them, talk to them, even if it's just 20 seconds to just pump the brakes and cool down, is that effective? Do you see them respond positively?
Absolutely.
Is that all it takes?
I see it all the time. When I'm dealing with kids. Now, when we're dealing with adults, we've got a different thing.
And I don't mean to be reductive or simplify it, but do you see incidents, and I don't mean the extreme incidents, but where maybe just a 10-second breather could resolve this?
With kids, for sure. But with
We're
adults,
talking
I don't
about
think so.
Adults. Chris, as part of your training, you've talked about conflict resolution. How do you convince somebody to snap out of it, take those 10 seconds, regroup themselves?
We tell people, what are you willing to lose? We kind of show them, like, when you go down this wrong path, the things that you're going to lose. What do you care about most? That's what you need to be thinking about in that moment, right? A lot of times disengaging, taking a deep breath, relaxing, actually just really thinking through, like set the emotions aside. I know it's hard to do, but that's something that if you choose to carry a gun, you have to learn how to start doing that, right? You got to start reconditioning the way you think, reconditioning the way you feel, understanding reaction versus response. Like you decide that you want to step in this realm, then you have to do the work. So teaching people how to hey, just sometimes just slow it down. Like just stop. Like look and really assess what we got going on here. I always tell people, is it worth it? Is it worth you losing your life? That's it. I think when we tell people, look, the decision that you're getting ready to make, is it worth losing your life? A, is it worth losing your family? B. And that's usually how we can get people to really start thinking on the right side. Because people are protectors, right? They want to protect their loved ones. So going back to that, right? You got your children and your wife at home. Are you willing to lose them over this? Is it worth it?
Ruben, you deal with young people that don't have a lot of self-worth. How do you impart that kind of message?
He hit it on the money. My biggest eye awakener, it was in Brevard Correctional Institute. I think they shut that down now. This is back in 1993. They had a guy come from outside, sat us all in a room and said, I want everybody who had the chalkboard to name what was most important to you in society. And then he had a separate list that he didn't let us see. So, it's family, my wife, my boyfriend, my dad, my grandparents. Grandparents came up a lot, right? We were all 25 and under YO camp. Then he turns around, he said, okay, on this list, I've asked this 3,000 times. These are the top ones. Look, and it's up here, no coincidence. He said, all of you are liars. Every single one of you are all full of shit. This is what he told us. He said, you're liars, blah, 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 blah. So, we're angry, we're jits, we're all walking around with this false ego, right? And he said, if you really cared about these things, you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me. So how do we transform that? 'Cause I'm hearing you talk and I'm reflecting on that. I'm like, damn, he's so right. So we need to transform that thinking now, prevention before detention.
Absolutely.
We need to get rid of stinking thinking now. We need to brainwash them. The whole brain needs to be washed anew, right? To the morality that we're also at. So we have to catch them now. Like, I don't know which one was saying, maybe Audra, really young. I mean, we already know. We could look at the third graders, fourth, fifth grade, and we could tell who's going to be in the county jail. Looking at the third, so if we know that dictates how the negativities, the population in the jail, why can't we use that age to dictate positive results as well? Because a lot of times they're like, no, we want you to mentor to the ones 15s. And I tell them all the time, man, let me get them 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds too. Because they're being influenced by them 13, 14, 15-year-olds. So yeah, we need to transform and make them see their value now, out here, not in there.
And Ruben, at what age will these youths start recognizing the racial disparities of these policies? When will they become cogent that there's a population in Central Florida that these laws aren't being applied to?
And when we're locked up, that's when we start saying that.
It's too late.
It's too late. Yeah, we're locked away. I have never seen youth from the hood in these red zone areas having a whole conversation about the law, about how it should be applied. Never. And I've done this all over the world: Chicago, New York City, Compton, LA. She's been with me to half of them. All the red zones here in Orlando, Miami. I've never seen a group of youth on their own talking about the law and how it should be applied. They know it's racist laws, right? But they don't start trying to apply it till it's too late, till we're in there. You know what I'm saying? Then now we need the attorney. Yeah. Now we're hoping my aunt knows Monique Worrell, right? Yeah, that's how it works, right? Now the nerdy judge up there that we were picking on, the type of guy that we were picking on in school. Now we're like, damn, boy, he's about to get that get back now, right? Yeah. So, and this is the reality. I've never seen a circle of them talk. I don't know if any of y'all, but I'm talking about these what they call the 1%ers, the worst of the worst. I've never seen them have these kind of conversations ever.
We'll conclude our roundtable discussion on Florida's Stand Your Ground law and gun ownership after the break. And we'd like to hear your thoughts on self-defense and Stand Your Ground. You can email us at engage@cfpublic.org. Or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. In the menu, select Send Us a Talkback, record your question or feedback, then hit Send. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media.
There's a lot going on in space, from efforts to land astronauts on the moon
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
to answering the age-old question, are we alone in the universe?
Wouldn't you want to know if there was life on another planet?
Are We There Yet? Explores space exploration every Tuesday at 6:30 here on Central Florida Public Media.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Richard Copeland, sitting in for Sharon Stone. We conclude our roundtable discussion, taped last night at the Central Florida Public Media Studios, addressing the use of Florida's Stand Your Ground law and the perceptions of the law across Central Florida's diverse communities. Participants included Ruben Saldana, a community advocate with Credible Messengers, a nationwide initiative matching community leaders in mentorship relationships with area young people. Chris Lusant is the owner of Firearms Training and Consulting Security Solutions. Monique Worrell is the state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit of Florida, serving as the chief prosecutor for Orange and Osceola counties. Audra Fontanez is a teacher at the Elite Preparatory Academy and a faith and healing leader. And Alton Edmond is a trial attorney and founder of Edmond Law LLC and a Second Amendment advocate. The discussion was moderated by Central Florida Public Media Community Engagement Director Rebecca Fernandez and myself.
Monique, earlier you alluded to, and I'm not going to drill down on this, but you alluded to almost an intentional vagueness behind the crafting of this law. Clearly, the application of Stand Your Ground is perceived differently in the communities than it is in the courtrooms, in the hallways of the courthouse, and in Tallahassee. Do the inequalities that you're describing, are they reflected in the statistics? Is there a cogency of that inequality, of that inequity of application?
I know that the statistics show that when you look at the application of Stand Your Ground law, who the shooter is and who the victim is matters. So I think the answer to your question is yes. With regards to the vagueness, though, it makes what the Attorney General did in this case easier, because it's easy for him to come and say, this is clearly self-defense, when there isn't any case law to say that it isn't or that it is, right? As the Attorney General, people are going to listen to him because he should know what he's talking about, even when he doesn't. So I think the vagueness is what creates the chaos, and the chaos that Alton talks about with different judges making all these different decisions and different state attorneys' offices in different circuits, and that I talked about with different state attorneys within the same office making all of these different decisions. And I want to say, too, that there's also a disillusionment among prosecutors and not even bothering to go forward because they just don't know. And when you have a prosecutor that has a docket of a couple hundred cases, if they don't know that they have a good chance of winning a case, not because the case law is clear, but because it's so vague and it just really is the luck of the draw, what judge you end up in front of and how they're feeling on that day, how the case is going to be decided, that is a disincentive for them to go forward on a particular case. And that's not justice because a person is dead. As we had the political argument about stand your ground or not stand your ground, I believe the media, the Attorney General, the defense, all lost sight of the fact that a man is dead. That last Christmas, Michal Setkov's family did not have him sitting around the table because he was engaged in a dispute with another citizen. We're talking about human life. And the fact that it can be dismissed, well, he shouldn't have hit her. She shouldn't have rammed her car into his. And how can we justify the murder of another human being because someone reacted poorly to being taunted. So I am optimistic that we can fix it. I know that's different than what has been said here, but I think it is going to take us as a community, white, Black, Hispanic, Republican, Democrat, independent, defense attorney, prosecutor, law enforcement, people who are in disenfranchised communities, all coming together and beginning to value human life again, in spite of what our culture has said.
If you could change the way that this discussion is presented, that the way that Stand Your Ground, the purpose of it, the narrative behind it, even the history behind it, the way that this is communicated to the residents, to the communities, how would that change? Is it just changing the words? Is it more than that? What should we try that we haven't tried yet? We've been dealing with community violence like this since the mid 80s.
It's not a political issue. Like, let's take politics out of this. This is a humanity issue.
Who are the humans
We're talking about any of us sitting at a stoplight in our car when Tina Algeo gets out and shoots Mihal Setkov and misses and shoots one of us instead.
How do you change the narrative from this is an acceptable way to resolve this conflict to this is an unacceptable? Because currently, Americans, Floridians, believe that the way to solve a problem is to pull out a gun, shoot somebody, and then hope that a self-defense or stand your ground holds up.
I don't believe people really believe that that's true. I think that what has come to this discussion is stand your ground right or not? Are they coming for our guns? Is this anti-Second Amendment discussion? I think that no matter what side of the table you sit on, fundamentally we agree that it is not okay to kill people in the middle of the street because of a road rage incident. I think we all agree. I don't think that is disputed. I think that where it becomes tricky and you see people dig their heels in is when we make it a Second Amendment issue, or I don't like a stand your ground issue, or this is a Monique Worrell issue, or it's a Democrat or Republican issue. That, I think, is what causes the noise. But I think fundamentally, as a community, we don't agree that that's okay.
Chris, can we separate stand your ground from Second Amendment? Are those intertwined in a way that they can't be separated?
I think so. Stand your ground is just that the ability to protect yourself, right? Stand your ground doesn't always mean that it's with a firearm, right? I think you can. I think the bigger thing is, like, we're all saying humanity, right? Your decision making, understanding that, life, right? There's no true value in that. Once you take it, like, it's gone, right? It's not like you can get it back. So understanding that is something that you have to cherish, that is something that we as people got to get back to understanding that we're all humans, and you have to have good decision making. And I think that some people out there value life. I can look at you and you and you and everyone else, and I see that this is my brother and my sister, and I'm going to treat you accordingly. And there are some people that I look at you and I don't see you as an equal. So because of that, I'm going to respond to you a certain kind of way. And I'm in possession of a firearm, so stand your ground says, well, if I feel threatened, because that's their interpretation, so just your mere presence, because you don't look like me, or you don't sound like me, you're not from my neighborhood, or you look a little rough around the edges, well, I'm in fear for my life, and I'm going to go to what I think I should do to protect myself.
So how do we find that return to a reverence for life, a valuing of life? You would say spirituality.
I would definitely say
Jesus.
biblical. If you go into if you just get familiar with the word and you start to grow your relationship with God, you would understand that all of these things, we are all united. He calls to unite each other. We're all supposed to be loving one another. You have another issue with mental health problems. We got people that are struggling with things in their thoughts. I definitely think you should go under like a mental health evaluation to even have a firearm, for sure. But the way the laws are, it's not gonna, people are taking the laws into their own hands, and they're making these things. But I'm a firm believer that it all stems from their brokenness. It all comes down to their inability to have emotional intelligence and regulate themselves. This is why I keep saying we go back to when they're young and start helping them understand. This is why I love the Word of God, because it teaches you to love one another no matter what you look like, no matter who you are or where you come from. You're supposed to love one another. You're supposed to live life with joy and peace, and have patience, and be kind, and have self-control. And in a perfect world, we'd all have self-control. And if we run into a demon that's trying to take our life, and we have to do whatever we have to do, okay, but we're not living in a perfect world. And the Bible is very clear that going back to what you said, it's not going to get better. In fact, it's going to get a lot worse. And children are going to come against their parents, and the world is going to experience certain things, and people just turning on each other, being very hateful, very narcissistic behavior. And it comes from these kids that are growing up on these video games now, and there's going to be more killing, and there's going to be more mental health problems, and there's going to be these things. But if we don't sharpen them spiritually, if we keep thinking that we're not going to get touched, oh, that's not going to happen in my house because I'm like this well-rounded person that is, I work hard, and, I come home and I take care and I'm paying attention to my kid and stuff. But if your kid feels lost on an emotional level, I have a lot of parents to students that think they're doing a great job, but their kid wants to kill themselves. You know who they tell? Me. You know why they tell me? Because they know that I can relate, because they know that that's something I have felt before. Because I'm very authentic, very open book with my students. So they come and they tell me, why? Because they need to be heard. They need to feel like what they're feeling is not, we're so busy alienating everyone. We're so busy pushing everybody away, trying to separate everyone, separating with color, separating with race, separating with politics. Like, me personally, I say go get a relationship with Christ and you're going to be good. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that if you can grow spiritually, there are plenty of people that I grew up with a bona fide hatred towards. I mean, a bona fide hatred, to the point where if I had a gun at the time, I would have killed them. I would have killed them. Okay? So in my sickness, right? You say we need or maybe it was you said something about, a healing or whatever, but God promises to give us a new heart. He promises to give us a new heart. Why? Because we're born with this brokenness already. We got generational curses. We got all of this other stuff going on. And then our actual lives that add to the problem, right? So getting close to God and understanding that your heavenly Father, you might have had a trash life father, but you got a heavenly Father who loves you, right? And when your children feel loved, or when you feel loved, there's a lot of guys out here don't get respected. And then they're reacting towards that, right? There's a lot of women out here that aren't being heard, and they're reacting towards that, right? And it all comes from a brokenness that they can easily fulfill with the relationship with God, right? So I would say start with youth. Fix your relationships by loving each other instead of being so focused on yourselves. I spent a lot of time focused on myself. Oh, but I want this, and oh, but I want to be respected here, and I want to be told this, and I want to be shown this. Why? When I could have easily just given that. And we all want something, but we're not willing to give. We all want these blessings, but we're not willing to look at ourselves and self-reflect and say, okay, well, maybe I'm part of the problem. Maybe it's my perspective. We need a renewing of the mind. We need to be transformed by God. A renewing of the mind. I can see why somebody did something to me, because now I understand that somebody did something to them. And that's why they were affected, and they just weren't strong enough to understand the spiritual warfare that they're going through in their life. They're not comprehending, right? But you know what God did for me? He made me realize He humanized them. He said, this is my child, right? Who is lost and didn't have the strength to grow spiritually and understand that they're loved, so that they don't continue to perpetuate the garbage, right? So I've lived both sides. I've lived life without Christ. I want nothing to do with it. I was the hard-headed one, like he said. I was the one that was like, yo, if somebody mess with you, I'm shooting them. That's it. Like, it was just a natural reaction. And like you said, I was not afraid. That's what happened. We desensitized, I believe the word you use. We're desensitized. I was desensitized to the point where I had a gun in my face, didn't even care. Shoot me, bro. Go ahead. Right? Didn't even care. But now I value my life so much. I honestly think that if somebody was to pull a gun, I sincerely believe that I would try to immediately go into prayer, immediately offer a hug or an embrace or something, because I see a lost soul. I see somebody who is living a life of pain, and they are trying to reflect, they're trying to mirror that pain, and they want to hurt people because hurt people hurt other people. And that's where the problem is. I personally think that if we can just pull everybody closer, unify them, we wouldn't have this problem. It's the same thing when I get into it when it comes to politics. I'm like, my gosh, at this point, I mean, even Jesus would have been a person that wouldn't be allowed in the country at this point. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Jesus would have been like, nah, you got to go home. Like, that's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't, that's why I can't do politics. That's why I can't do it. Because you'll have to literally deport Jesus Christ.
We have a little under 10 minutes left.
Oh,
so
sorry.
No.
I get on fire for God. I can't even stop.
I love your passion. I want to go around the room and close with this. I want to ask you what you wish people understood about the Stand Your Ground law and the impact that its application has. And since I started with you, Alton, I'll give you the first shot at closing us out.
I wish people just understood on a very basic level what I sat down and taught my godson about 2 weeks ago when I was sitting on the couch with him and my shirt came up and he saw my weapon on my hip, and I began to educate him on firearm safety. A gun is a tool, not a toy, that can be used to protect or destroy. And human life is valuable, and very much due care and course should be taken before you ever make the decision to take that away from someone. Because when you take away human life, it can never return.
Monique Worrell?
I want people to know that self-defense law is not without limitation. That there are provisions that say that if you are the aggressor, or if you are in the commission of a forcible felony, that you now have a duty to retreat that Stand Your Ground as we know it otherwise had taken away. And that you must use every method possible to retreat under those circumstances before being able to have a legitimate claim of self-defense. So there are limitations on Stand Your Ground, and it is not okay for you to shoot or kill someone after you started or instigated or incited violence. And that in the Ninth Circuit, in spite of the interference from Tallahassee, as long as I sit in this seat, you will be prosecuted.
Dr. Fontanez?
I have to agree with her, to be honest with you. You know, I really do. I have to agree. And I just think that, you know, everybody's not going to follow the law the way it's supposed to be followed. And it's even sadder when you go into the system and it fails you like that, where you're not being held accountable according to what the law says. You know, you have to, like, this lady knew, like she said, had a gun and knew she had a gun. If I saw it in that way, where, you know, I don't think it qualifies for that. You know, that doesn't, to me, she should be in prison. You know what I mean? So it's not working. The law needs to have people in place that are going to put more thought into what it actually means to apply that law. Like if that's actually what happened. It seems like I don't really know what happened at that point because it seemed like they saw a different situation, because the way you describe it, it's like, I feel like it's common sense that it's not, it's not a grounds for stand your ground. So I don't know what happened there. Whoever was in place to judge otherwise, I think they need to go to court and be tried behind that.
Chris Lusson, what do you wish people understood about Stand Your Ground?
Primarily, number one, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? I always tell people that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Understand, like I said earlier, what are you willing to lose? You know what I mean? Stand your ground doesn't mean that you go out that it gives you the ability to start something, and then now I want to protect myself. True protection is you try to avoid the situation at all costs, right? True protection is you leave your ego at the door because you know what's more important. I want to make it home to my family, right? And going back to, again, I reiterate, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Treat people accordingly, right? Understand that stand your ground is for when your life is truly in jeopardy, not because you started the altercation or you put your life in jeopardy by your own means. It's understanding that, once you take a life, that's it. You know what I mean? And there's cons to that, right? There's things that will affect you negatively and your family. So just think of that, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Treat people accordingly, have a good heart, and try to avoid the drama or the nonsense as best as possible.
Ruben?
I'm not going to say people, I'll say the population of kids I deal with, youth from 5 to 25. I would love to have like a bucket in the middle of this table and have them put all their phones in there and force them to be part of these conversations. First to listen, to learn, to educate themselves. And then I love hearing them talk afterwards and have their own circle. And then we could sit back and we could shut up and we can listen, and then we can address what their real concerns are. They just need to be educated, and they're not being educated.
That was our roundtable discussion recorded last night at Central Florida Public Media. This is a conversation we'd like to continue with you. We'd love to hear your feelings about Stand Your Ground and the way you see it impacting your community. You can connect with Engage via email at engage@cfpublic.org, or you can send us talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. In the menu, select Send Us a Talkback, record your question or feedback, then hit send. Join us next Thursday as Engage looks at innovative techniques being cultivated to identify and treat dementia. You can hear an extended version of this conversation at our website, cfpublic.org. I'm Richard Copeland, sitting in for Sharon Stone. Thank you for joining us. Stick around for All Things Considered following NPR News.